Honestly, what is it about dragons? I don't know. I was looking through my book collection lately and I have tons and tons of books about dragons. And there's some peculiar things going on here. Maybe you can help me to figure it out. But let's start with a very traditional dragon story. It's St. George and the Dragon with beautiful illustrations by Trina Sharp-Hyman. This is a Caldecott Medal winning book. So the story is, and it's a little bit different from the traditional, the story is that George is a famous warrior of all kinds, and he is well known. And the princess of a country goes out on behalf of her father and all the people of her country to find a hero who will kill a dragon who's been marauding over the entire country. And the description of the dragon is that it has a tail that stretches for miles. So the setting of the scene is the princess who rides a little white donkey and the famous warrior on board his beautiful horse. So off they go, they search through the country there. Turned back a few times, but she persuades him to keep going, and of course finally they come to the big moment when they are actually back near her house, her home, the castle where her family lives, and finally George meets the dragon. Now, this is no simple one-shot dragon story. George encounters this enormous dragon 3 times, and each time he's almost killed. But somehow, by one means or another, he's miraculously saved. So we get to the end of the story, and George has indeed managed to kill this dragon, and it was not simple. But he is greeted warmly by her family, and of course, the only possible prize he could want is to marry the princess. So that part all stands true. But St. George has been told he has other missions, and off he goes. But he comes back, of course, to his princess wife. Now, that's a dragon story of the traditional type involving a man. But I tell you, something's funny going on here, because all of these books here have a woman who is the master of the dragons. Now, this moves an old concept a long way forward, and there must be something about women and dragons. What do you think? Do you think it's because they're so ferocious and bold and they can fly through the skies just like a sea? Is it because we wish we were like dragons, we had control of everything? Is it because we want to control the dragons? So many of these stories are about how dragons are not so fierce when it comes to very wise women. This is an old one by Patricia A. McKillop, The Forgotten Beasts of Eld. Now, this lady is a magician of a type. She is able to communicate with all kinds of animals, weird ones and normal ones, and she can use her mind to contact creatures. And there's a long, long tale of the story in which she tries to get this dragon under some control. And of course, in the end, she manages it because she's pretty magical herself. Another old one, Robin McKinley, is The Hero and the Crown. I read this one when I was a teenager, and honestly, that woman in an age of sort of medieval times went up on this horse and faced into a dragon. Unbelievable stuff. She could never remember a time when she had not known the story. She had grown up knowing the story of the dragon. And she too eventually is able to overcome the dragon. Now, I have to confess that when it comes to George R. Martin, I do kind of draw a line there because there's so much wicked cruelty in his series that I don't think, I wasn't able to continue the whole thing. And sometimes it's magnificent at times, and the dragons, which again are controlled by a woman, They are wonderfully portrayed, but it was a bit much for me. You may feel differently. Feel free to let me know. But recently I've been looking at Robin Hobb. Now, Robin is a woman, and she has written, 3 different books. And this is about a country called the Rain Wilds. And the story goes that it was once a beautiful land, and there were beautiful animals living in it and so on. And there were elderlings, wise older people, who kept everything in order and built a beautiful city. And in this city, the dragons and these elderlings lived in harmony, and the dragons did everything that was required. But time has moved on, and this country has gone underwater. There's been terrible floods, and dragons disappeared. The elderlings no one has ever known of. Nobody can find the city called Kelsingra anymore. And suddenly, a group of children who are castaways. Nobody wants them around. The people are living in trees most of the time to keep away from the wild waters. And these children have developed some strange physical characteristics. Sometimes it's a patch of weird looking stuff on their skin. Sometimes they have a claw instead of a hand, but they're good at climbing trees. And they are chosen to look after a few very, very old looking fragile dragons that they have uncovered out of dragon eggs. They're not at all what dragons used to be. They're just feeble creatures. So they assign these young children that nobody wants to look after these dragons that nobody wants. And they have to do it in this environment where it's just, the water is actually acid. So it's not good to go in it. So the children have to find food and bring it to the dragons. And the story goes on a long, long way. And these children get bigger and they become more dragon-like. And the dragons get wiser and are able to communicate with the children. So it's quite an experience going back and forward here. And there's lots more in this story. And eventually, you're hoping they're going to get to the final place, to the Kelsingra, and see what's left of it, because everything else in the world has been wrecked and ruined by the waters. So quite a different sort of thing. But here's the thing that's a link. Robin Hobb has her people, the human beings, with dragon characteristics. She's not the only one. There's a whole series here. The first one is called Serafina. And Serafina lives in another medieval type country, or civilization you might say. And she, although she doesn't know it at the beginning, she is half dragon. It doesn't show, but it's there inside, and it lets her be able to do things that other people can't do. She's also a musician, so she works at the court and learns a whole lot about how people manage in a court, how they survive and how they don't survive. And Shadowscale is the sequel of this too. So we have these connections, women and dragons. Women and children with dragon characteristics. What is it? You would think dragons were a very male thing, very strong and scary, and who would ever want to be near one, like the St. George story? I don't know, maybe you know more than I do. I'd love to hear your opinion, because this is really quite a puzzle. I've loved stories about dragons, and I'm sure, and I know that there are more. Anne McCaffrey, for instance, beautiful, wonderful stories. I loved every one of them. But I gave them all away to a friend's son who was keen on dragons, and I had read them 5, 6, 7 times through. I wish now I hadn't, because I wouldn't mind reading them again. So give me your thoughts on dragons and women and this kind of saga, this often medieval type of story where women have to learn how to live and how to be successful and how to be powerful. I'd like to end with one of my favorite books. This one's called The Knight and the Dragon. Now in this story, there is a knight, and he's looking for trouble, and there's a dragon. He's not too sure that he's looking for trouble, but he lives quite near the knight's castle. So one day, the knight thought, I should really know about these dragons. So he went and found a book and read about it. And back in his cave, the dragon went through all the things left from his ancestors, and he found some books about fighting knights. Oh, you know what's coming next, don't you? So the knight prepares. He builds some armor for himself. He fits it on his body. And the dragon does some practicing, switching his tail. They're preparing, obviously. And on they go. The knight makes some weapons. The dragon practices grimaces in the mirrors. And off they go to meet each other. Things don't quite go as planned. It's not very successful from either side. And it's going on like this, and it's annoying everybody. And it's just going on, and as if it's never going to come to a conclusion. Neither one of them is going to win. So along comes somebody special, and this is the part of the book that I loved. The dragon's in a dire state, and over here, the knight is stuck up a tree. But in the middle comes the lady who's going to help them. And she is the lady from the castle who looks after the castle library. And on her cart, she has a selection of books that she feels will solve this giant problem. Knights, dragons, no winning. So she gives them a book each. She gives the cookbook, the outdoor cookbook, to the dragon. And she gives to the knight how to build a barbecue. You see what's coming up now? So the lady with the books who knows all the answers gets a beautiful knight and dragon barbecue going, and it solves all the problems, and the people love it. The knight's doing what he likes, the dragon's doing what he likes, using his fire, and the people are benefiting from the peace and the food that they make. Now, if only all books were like this, if only life was like this, that could be solved so easily. If you like stories about dragons, or if there's something else you'd like me to talk about, please click like, leave a comment if you will. I'm interested in knowing what you think and how you've enjoyed this series of Ruth the Reader. Have fun with your reading. I always do.